Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay family, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is the Heart of Pleasure Project. Our co-host tonight is Jennifer Peterkin, who is also host of the Human Experience podcast. And our guest on this evening is Pam Villeneuve, founder of the Heart of Pleasure Project. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or our co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can also text 437-778-3299. And as usual, if you have any resources from your that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. With that, Jen, if you would greet our listeners on tonight.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Good evening, Love Bay. So glad to be back. It's been a while. As Tia said, my name is Jennifer Peterkin. Happy to be a co-host on Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia. And the way that Tia and I got connected is that we both have a past with domestic violence, and we both became advocates out of having that past. And I just feel really fortunate to have a friend in Tia, as well as a partner in advocacy. So, as Tia said, I am host of the Human Experience podcast, which I launched earlier this year. The podcast can be found on all major podcasting platforms. And essentially, what we do is we tell stories, and each episode is somebody telling their story and from their perspective, and how what they've lived through has shaped their perspective on the world and how they see themselves, other people, and even God.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Pam, if you would take a moment and greet our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Certainly. Hello, everyone. Again, I am Pam. Sometimes I'm referred to as Mama P here in my home. And I thoroughly enjoy that. I want to thank you, Tia. It's an honor to be here with you and Jen, sharing story and the power of story. I firmly believe that is part of our human experience, and that is what helps carry us into hope. And I learned that a long time back in my story, 34 years ago, when I met the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the beginning of a new birth for me. So I think what I would like to do before I get started on that story is I would like to just take a few moments to sink us into our bodies, into that heart and that body, into pleasure. So if you would indulge me, I would be most grateful, because it would help me as well. So I'm just going to ask and invite us to all just close our eyes for a minute and just feel our hips sitting in the seat. And that seat is there as grace holding us. Just as that seat is being held by Mother Earth, and we are being cradled in her beauty. And with that, let's take a deep breath in, all the way down to those hips, and feel that. And exhale with a big sigh of grace. Let's do that 2 more times. And another sigh of grace. And one more. And just feel your body and where it's at. For me right now, I have a little shakiness in my heart center because I'm about to speak about me. And that's a little scary sometimes. So we might feel these things in our body, and that's a good thing. So just take a moment to tune into your beautiful body, and what it's speaking to you tonight. Maybe there's tension in the neck. Maybe there's some buzzing in your head. Oh, yeah. And let's do one more thing before we come back to our screen and just give a shake of everything and shake off all the stuff of today. Just shake it off and let it all come out and shake it off. Yes. And let's come back to our togetherness.
I'm ready to go lay down.
Yes, good. But our nervous system can always use that.
Well, I think that's very interesting because that's what I do. That's one of my grounding techniques when I go through flashbacks or a panic attack. Like that's one of the things that I do, like to try to get myself centered. And it's always, it may take a few minutes sometimes, but it always helps me to feel, to get back to me, to get back into the moment. So that's relaxing and calming and comforting for me. So I do want to start with sharing some resources, and then Pam, we're going to turn it right over to you. First, we have Pastor Darius Daniels. He's the pastor of Change Church. His website is dariusdaniels.com. You can visit his YouTube channel, which is Darius Daniels TV. We have the Jewish Family and Children's Service. This is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Their website is www.jfcsphill.org. And then we have Home Shalom, which is a program that teaches teens and young adults about healthy relationships. Their website is theadventproject.org/home-shalom. And then we have the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse. Their website is department/Jewish-Coalition-Against-Domestic-Abuse, and that will take you right to their page. So again, listeners, our topic on tonight is the Heart of Pleasure Project. And so with that, Pam, if you really could start with telling us what is the Heart of Pleasure Project and what led you to create it, we can start there.
Sure. So the Heart of Pleasure Project is about meeting our emotions and healing our hearts, getting into our body and out of our head, allowing our minds to follow our body and let our body take the lead. All of the trauma that I experienced in my life was held in my body, and I had no idea that that was where it was. I kept working from my mind only, and I had to learn along my journey that that's where it lies. I have to meet that place in order to be free. Once I meet that place, in whatever way it appears, if it's a charge, a big charge, if it's big anger, if it's big grief, whatever that is, when I meet that charge or I duplicate that charge, it ends up dissipating and I create openness and freedom. And so the Heart of Pleasure Project, I do with a lot of women, and I have done some couples, somatic work to the body, and I am coaching in intimacy and life and our sexuality for vital, healthy sex life. That's the Heart of Pleasure. And we find pleasure in so many different ways, not just our sexuality, but it opens up into all of those places. So with that, the way that this has become a birth, I have to go back to my roots and share with you a little bit about what happened to me and what it's like today. I was born 63 years ago, and I was born to a mom who was very young. She was 19. My dad was 5 years older than her, and it started out rocky from the beginning because she was unstable.
Mm-hmm.
So I can share with you that my mom was my first abuser, both physically, emotionally, and sexually. And her ancestry and family legacy was a lot of violence and alcoholism. So with that knowledge, today, that has given me a new freedom and a new happiness. At the time, though, I was that child and I was strongly imprinted by what happened to me there. And I didn't know that. And as I progressed into my young adult and teen life, I started meeting with the place of not wanting to feel my feelings, because there were a lot of feelings starting to come up for me from those traumas that I didn't really understand. And so I embarked on the next part of my journey, which was to numb out all those feelings of anger, shame, remorse, all of the things that came along with that trauma. And what I found, what was so interesting, is when I looked at moving into my addiction, what I kept repeating was that same theme. I was the victim in my relationships. So where that took me was eventually to a place of domestic violence, and that you have shared with others of your story as well. In the end of my drinking and drug addiction, I was stripping for a living. I was in a relationship with a man that was beating me up. I didn't see any way out. My brain was really contemplating either killing myself or killing him. This is where I had gotten to. I remember one particular story. I ended up in the emergency room, and a young intern was tending to me. And he said, "You seem like such an intelligent young woman. What are you doing here?" And I had no answer for him. And that was real shaky for me to hear that. But it wasn't enough to help me at that juncture. But that was just one of many messages that I received along the journey. Eventually, what happened for me in that situation was that person was, I say, divinely removed from my life. He had a warrant out for his arrest and he left the state. So I was fortunate in that. But like I shared in the beginning of my story, that I kept repeating the theme of being the victim. And so I eventually got to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I once again repeated my theme. I didn't really have a voice. I kind of morphed into whatever the person, if the person saw me a little bit and really latched onto me, I did whatever I could to be whatever they wanted me to be. I mean, that was how I was existing. And again, it happened again in my early sobriety. And I was with someone that, threatened to kill me. And that was different for me, because now I wasn't drinking and using, and I was experiencing some of the same experiences. What I did have that was different at that time is I had started to work with a therapist one-on-one. And that therapist, he was a very strong person, and he helped me through that situation. So we all are many and varied on, I think, who the when the divine or the universe puts those people in our path, right? Are we able to listen and to say, okay, even though this is scary, I'm going to step forward, right? And that was one of those moments for me. I was able to step forward there and get some help, some more help, and get to a safer place. I had to let go of all of the people that I was connected to at that time in my early sobriety. And that was a bit scary because I thought, how am I going to do this now? And I had to forge some new relationships. And I had to start trusting women, which was another whole facet for me because my beginnings were very shaky about trusting women. So from that, has grown so very much. That marriage I had to step away from and end. And 5 years later, I met the husband that I'm currently with. And that has been quite an adventure. An adventure of growth for both myself and him. He has had to do a lot of healing work as well. With his origins and whatnot. And what was so fascinating about our time together, our life together, has been, I think we started out in a very deep friendship. We got to know one another, warts and all. We were able to talk about a lot of more intimate topics and share. And that, I think, was a good foundation for us to get through all of the ups and downs that we've experienced in our marriage. But there was a time where there was a lot of stress on our marriage. We had, I've had 2 sons. We had a son who's now 27, and then 10 years later, we had a surprise baby. Who was born with Down syndrome and diagnosed with autism. And so that created another whole dynamic in our family unit. Many couples who have special needs children usually don't end up staying together. It's a very difficult challenge. So we had that, and we still had some of our own old wounds that we hadn't faced. And so a lot was surfacing. And we finally came to a place where we hired a coach to work with. And upon that beginnings, I had to make a very strong statement because there was a lot of emotional abuse that was happening verbally, off and on in different ways. And I was finding myself in that same place of not feeling safe with this human, even though there was no threats physically or any of that. I was reliving some of my old triggers. So I'm sure that some can relate to that. It might not be the same circumstances, but we may be reliving some of those things. And so I still wasn't free. So at that point in time, right before the coach, actually a few years before the coach, I said to him, I'm going to go back to getting some help. And he's like, well, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know what we're going to do, but I know I have to do that. And he wasn't quite willing to do that at that time. So I embarked on a lot of work with my codependency. I did a lot of in-person group work for a couple of years with that. And that set the stage for me to step into unpacking my sexual trauma. Because I had to get to the root of what I shared in my beginning of my story. I had to get to the root of what was going on with me. And that was the root. It started there. So I share that because that's very, very, very important in the work that I do with others today. Getting to the root, feeling what's there, duplicating that charge, and creating openness and new pathways for pleasure, to feel it really genuinely feel it in the body. So a little bit down the pike, when we started working with this coach, I had to step up to the plate again and say to him, I can't continue on in this marriage if the passive aggressive and all of this verbal stuff continues. And he made a commitment and I made a commitment. And from that place is where the rise started to happen. The mentor that I was working with at the time, Alex, who I speak of very fondly, she has since passed from this world. And I talk to her still often. But she said to me at that time, this is the beginnings of the Pleasure Project. Pam, that's what she called me, Pam. It's time to rebirth yourself sexually now. You've unpacked all of this trauma. And I looked at her with big eyes and I was like, what the heck does that look like? And she just laughed and she said, oh, Pam, you will know. And sure enough, what started to transpire is, as I say, the universe gave me winks and things started to be put in my path that guided me to that rebirthing of myself sexually. And that was where the healing began. And it has since moved into so many other places, working with up-level communication, working as an orgasmic art guide, working as an erotic blueprint coach. You know, these are the places that I have learned how to tend in devotion to me and to my body. And that has been the rise in the Heart of Pleasure Project. So I pass on all that I've gathered from that rising, and I continue, and I share with others in their life.
Thank you so much for sharing, and you've given just so much information in just a few moments. I really want to applaud you, first of all, for sharing your story, for being encouraging, and for being forthright and helpful with others. And we do know that there are different forms of abuse. It's not just physical. So it is verbal, it is emotional. And just for you to not only recognize what was happening to you, what was going on, but to stand up for yourself and to make the decision within yourself, not just mentally or emotionally, I don't like this, something needs to change, but to actually do it, to put action behind the thoughts and the words. And you did that for yourself. So I just congratulate you and thank you so much on that point and for sharing it. There's so much that you said, but one of the points that you made when you began to speak early on was about holding trauma in your body. And I would love it if you could speak on that a bit more, because I didn't know how to describe it. I didn't know the terms for it. But at some point, I realized that I was holding my trauma in my body. So there were times I would be standing or sitting absolutely stiff, or I just couldn't move my body the way that I wanted to. And I would realize sometimes it would be like I was actually holding my breath for no reason. Like I was anticipating for something to happen. And, as I realized what it was and, I worked through it, with my counselors and things like that, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know it was a thing until I started to realize it within myself. So if you could speak to that a bit more, how we actually do hold trauma in our bodies.
Absolutely. So we're all wired as human beings for our nervous system to have various responses. The animal part of our body is created for that. So we have those nervous system responses, which can be, right, freeze, which you spoke of, flight, fight, and fawn, which I've experienced that. So we're trying to make it nice. We're trying to make it nice and keep it calm. And we're doing everything in our power to on and make it that way.
Yep.
So these responses, right, are in the body. You can actually feel sensation in your body. Like you said, it can get tense, it can get stiff, right? You can feel tension in the neck. Like I can get a lot of neck tension here, right? And all my veins start to like really push out, right? The heat, sweating in my armpits, right? All of these are physical responses that are held in the body to trauma. What happens when I work with somebody is I take them into safety first. So we build a real rapport around safety in the body, because that's from that place and that place only is where we can access what's been held. And what arises from that, and what I've had experiences with my own, is a trauma can come up in the form of we feel sensation, we feel anger, we feel grief. The body starts expressing that in the unique ways that it does. Some of us may be yelling incredibly loud, or just sounds might come out, or the body may shake and quiver on its own. It just has its natural response. And we go into that space of the body. In other words, we go into, let's say I have a tension in my heart right here at the chest, right? We go into that space. We really focus the mind into that space and see what comes up. Sometimes it might be a thought, it might be an image, it might be more of a sensation, it might be extreme tight pain, and we stay with it and allow it to move and have its way. So we're honoring that part of us. We're honoring the bodies. And sometimes the image or the thought may be of a past experience. For instance, I had an experience with my hips feeling really tight, and I was holding them, and the practitioner was working with me. And all of a sudden, I just had this swell come up of I was birthing my first child. Naturally, I had no inductions or anything. And I held all of my emotion during that. And all of a sudden, it all started coming and swelling and coming out. But I didn't do that when I was birthing my first child. I held down and bared. I didn't want anybody to hear me say anything. I wasn't going to cuss. I wasn't going to do nothing, right? Like I was holding with everything I had. And when we do that, the nervous system takes big hits on the daily. And that's why there's so many illnesses like autoimmune disorder and all of that stuff, because the nervous system can't keep doing that. It just, it's putting a big hurting on it. And so when I release that, what happens afterwards is that and there's that open, calm feeling. Mm-hmm. Just the mind isn't chattering. It feels like pure love. And you just have a knowing that you're all right.
Yeah.
You're all right. And the strength and the beauty is when another can witness you in it. You know, I've taken myself into my own body, but when I have another that's with me and holding me in that, it's very powerful, right? Because we're connected to one another. Mm-hmm. I believe in my higher power is the energy that surges through you and Jen and me is all the same energy. It makes our heart beat, our brains fire electrics, right? It's the same. So I feel like I am you, you are me, whoever it is that I'm meeting today. Yeah. Does that help? Does that give you a real picture of how meeting that can look?
I think so. I think it paints a picture, and I the thing about art, if you're talking about painting pictures or photos, we all can look at the same drawing and see something different. You know, so I think that's remarkable. But Jen, do you have a question or a comment for Pam?
I'm just really excited to hear you talk about this, Pam, because What you're talking about is somatic release, correct? Am I correct in that
Yes,
term?
absolutely.
So that's something that I actually have just recently learned about myself.
Mhm.
And I have, been a fan of The Body Keeps the Score for years. And so I am 100% with you on our body holding our tensions and our trauma and the illnesses that we make ourselves sick with, and the connection between mind body. I am 100% with you there. And in fact, have experienced more than my fair share myself. But I don't remember how I first heard of it, but somatic release came up recently, and I was like, my mind was blown the first time I saw it, because I was like, you can do that? That's fantastic. Because I think a lot of times where the disconnect is we understand, and anybody that's been through trauma, I think, can understand that your body holds on to your trauma, but then
Mhm.
how do you get rid of it? Like, there's no instruction beyond that. So I really do appreciate just the idea of actually moving your body, and and I am not an expert in any way. I know almost nothing about this, so I'm glad you're here. Um, but it kind of working things to actually release that. And in my mind, it's almost like a valve that has been like stuck closed, and you're
Mhm.
trying to like pry it open to release. And yeah, so it's not something that I've actually practiced before, because again, I'm very new to the idea of it, but I'm excited about it because I absolutely believe that we need to, in our Western mindset, be more aware of how big the mind body connection is, and how detrimental it is when we ignore what happens in our bodies because of what we experience emotionally and mentally. um, I think, yeah, it's just, it's wonderful. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how necessary it is, because I think, Tia and I have talked a lot about going through counseling, and talk therapy has been super helpful for me. I know it's been helpful for her as well. Um, but that's one piece of healing, and something we always say on this program is healing isn't linear. And so
Mhm.
you will go back and heal over and over again. So the more that I have been learning about this mind body connection, the more I'm realizing that there's stuff that I still am holding on to, that I need to get rid of, and that I need to express. Um, and I do struggle with autoimmune, and I do struggle with pain, chronic pain. And I'm like, man, here we go. Maybe I actually have an answer finally. I've been dealing with this for 10 years. Maybe I actually have an answer. So yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, and where you're coming from. Um, and yeah, I hope that you continue to do well with it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a little bit more I can share on that. I think for listeners, I'm sharing, where I'm at today, but I can tell you when I first had to meet emotions and feelings, I had this old idea stuck in my mind that is cultural, right? That I am not strong if I'm expressing my emotions and feelings. I do not look like a strong woman if I do that. So for years, I really held and bared down and didn't express or show those emotions. I was also afraid of anger. I was afraid of anger because I watched my mother rage into these frenzies that were very scary. So, and I would hear my father say, not in front of the children and all of these things. And so what I did with that was I chose not to have that. I wasn't going to be that way. And that's not part of our humanness, right? Anger is part of the 88 keys of the piano keyboard of emotions. There's so much. There's such a range, right? But I was denying my own self of feeling feelings. So I was in denial and resistance, and I didn't even realize it. So for me, first I had to I did some little experiences. Like I also teach FEM experiences, which are going on an emotional tour, and just starting to get familiar with allowing a little bit of expression with emotion to come, right? Because in our culture, I met with, you don't want to show that, because then you're looking like you're not in control. So you really don't want to be doing that. Stay consistent, don't show that emotion, and hold it together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that created stress. For me, I too have autoimmune psoriatic arthritis, and also I'm a herpes virus carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was flaring all the time because of that holding for a lot of years. Constant autoimmune flares, constant herpes flares, constant. And I don't have that today. Today my nervous system's a lot more regulated, but I've had to titrate myself to get to that place. So it took time for me to first I had a lot of fear and anxiety about meeting anger, right? A lot of it. So it took some time, and it actually, what helped me was working with other women initially, because they understood and they weren't judging me. They understood these emotions, and they could hold that space, that sacred space for me with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was huge for me, huge to build trust, huge to build safety. And that's really, the beginnings have to be from safety. From that, what's so beautiful is we can start to really feel. We can really feel the experiences in our life. We can really feel and smell the smells of spring. We can really feel the tingles in our body when something intrigues us. Right? We can really have a beautiful experience with our beloved, where we're really connecting. And we really feel that connection. It's genuine. There's no performative arousal. There's none of that. It's authentic and genuine. And that's from all the work of somatic work. The more we open to that, the more pleasure we get to experience from that. We're making space for that. And that's the beauty, I think, of doing the work. It's scary. It's real scary. It's scary for me in the beginning. So
I think it's I agree with the point that you just made, and I think it's worth just reiterating that you can experience authentic pleasure.
yes.
There is another side of trauma. You do get to the other side now, and I don't know what your exact struggle may be, how long you may be in it, but I can tell you that you can experience pleasure after trauma, physical, mental, emotional. You can experience healthy intimacy, a healthy sexual relationship. You can experience that after trauma when you're in a safe space, once you do the work, when you go through your healing process. So it's not destroyed. It's not just over and you'll never get it again. So just like we emphasize with people, you can rebuild your finances, you can rebuild your home, you truly can rebuild pleasure in areas that are just intimate. That is possible. But as Pam said, it's going to take work. You do have to put the work into it. So you can't keep your head in the sand. And it's okay to say, this is something that I enjoyed, but trauma took it away from me. Trauma tainted it. And I want to get back to enjoying this particular area, whatever it is. It's okay. And you can do it. You can work towards it. But again, it does take work. Nothing happens overnight. And your process is different from everyone else's. If there's something that you don't enjoy anymore because of trauma, you don't want to try it again, you want to stay away from it. If you make that decision from a healthy place, then that's okay. But if you're still in fear making that decision, then that's not good. And you have to allow yourself the room to heal and go through it. But I think that that is a beautiful point. You can have authentic pleasure after trauma. And even the issue of autoimmune diseases, what it made me think of was that, while we're dealing with trauma, most of us, we do have other issues that we're dealing with. I have alopecia, and the stress of what I was dealing with made it worse. So, some people think I shave my head just to do it. This is not a fashion statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it wasn't something that was at first visible to other people because, there are different hairstyles and how I did my hair. I could hide it. You didn't know it. And then at some point, I started to wear really nice wigs. But I still had to do something with my hair because the stress of what I was going through, my hair was still damaged. And my hair was like just as long as the wigs that I was wearing, but it was like getting really thin and coming out in patches. And so I still had to do something with my hair. So after some contemplation, I decided to shave my head. And which that's not something you just get up and do. So I'm not advising anybody to just get up and do that. I thought about it for about a year and a half. And I have 4 daughters. I talked to my daughters about it. And they were all for it. They supported me in it. And so when the day came that I finally wanted to do it, I did it. My plan was to shave my head and just, keep wearing the wigs that I had. Once I shaved, I looked in the mirror. I said, "This is nice." I like this. And so that's what I did. But the point being was the stress in my body, and for me, came out through the alopecia. That's something that I had to deal with. So I had to deal with that in addition to the trauma of the domestic violence. So now I'm not only looking in the mirror feeling less than because of what my ex said and because of what my ex did. Now I'm losing my hair. Now that's an issue of I'm a woman. I want my hair. I want to be what I think is pretty, what culture says is pretty. I'm not matching up to that now because my hair is now destroyed. And getting worse. And that's another tool that he used to make me feel even worse. So all of that to say is that we have other issues that we're dealing with while we're going through trauma, and it can make it worse, make you feel worse than you feel just dealing with the person or the abuse. It's a lot, but you can get through it. You can get to the other side. I got to the other side. Again, I am not telling anybody to go and shave your head. Get up and do that. But I am saying there is a happiness that you can have whether you have hair or not, whether your hair is short or long, whether you decide to wear wigs or not. Like this past year, I decided, just to wear my wigs whenever I felt like it. Not in the summertime. No, I can't do wigs in the summer. It's too hot. But I do it because I want to, not because I'm running away from a stigma, not because I'm trying to make myself feel or believe something that I don't already believe in my heart. So it doesn't matter, wherever you are, wherever you're going through, there is another side. You can get through it. You can get to it. And so again, dealing with trauma, we have to deal with other stuff. Some of us we have children with disabilities, or we're taking care of elderly parents, or we may be sick ourselves in another area. I know there are women who are dealing with cancer and dealing with domestic violence. There are men who are dealing with sicknesses in their bodies while they're dealing with domestic violence. It's just things happen and we can feel suffocated and we can feel like the life has been sucked out of us and you feel like that's it, it's over. But again, I just want to stress, you can walk in authentic pleasure, happiness, and joy on the other side of trauma. But I'm not gonna lie to you, it does take work.
Yeah.
It takes work to get there. When I told my daughters, that I was thinking about shaving my head, they were instantly supportive, instantly. And I was fighting in my mind because I'm like, I'm trying to stand in front of my daughters and say, you are more than your hair, you are beautiful. At the same time, like, I wanted my hair.
Yeah.
It was a struggle, but that's, yeah, we have things to deal with. You have to deal with it. And it does come out physically, other than the physical abuse. It does come out in areas. You may lose weight, you may gain weight, you may lose your hair, whatever may happen to your hair. There are things that we have to deal with, but you can deal with it, and you can get to the other side. And I want to say this: you don't have to explain anything to anybody. You really don't. You do what you do for yourself, take care of yourself the best that you can, and you move forward. With that, Jen, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, Pam, I really appreciated what you said about emotion. And it just made me think of the juxtaposition of that men and women meet when we talk about emotion. So, men are often in our society told, like, don't cry, don't, feel certain things. And so they feel stilted with their emotions. And then women are told, don't get angry, always be polite. And so I think one of the things that, especially in our society, I really appreciated that you identified anger as an emotion and not this separate amorphous thing. Because I think that a lot of times, since women are the emotional ones and we're not supposed to get angry, it doesn't get categorized as an emotion. And so we are all human beings that feel all of these ranges of emotion. And because of the way that we have been brought up, and generationally, whatever, we don't always know how to process them. And I just really identified with what you said about anger, because I remember being in my counselor's office not long after I had left my ex-husband, and just really kind of tiptoeing around the fact that I was angry, and giving me permission to feel that, and to experience it, and that it wasn't wrong of me to have those emotions. It didn't make me less than, and it didn't make me bad, And so I think it's really important to highlight the fact that all emotions don't have no emotion, no emotion has morality attached to it, right? They are our emotions, and they are a full spectrum, and because we're human beings, we can feel them. I think what you do with your emotions matters, and how you manage them. And since a lot of us aren't necessarily equipped or prepared to do so, that's where we get into some trouble with our emotions, and we start doing things that maybe aren't so good, but the emotion itself isn't the problem. And so I really appreciate the spotlight on specifically anger for women. And so here's my shout out. You have a right to be angry. Okay. Things happen to you. You have the right to be angry. Get angry. And honest to God, sometimes it is the first push to start getting you through your trauma. Like Tia said, there are things on the other side of it. But feel that anger, because it's doing nothing for you to pretend to everyone else that you don't feel it, while inside you are literally burning with rage.
Yeah. Jen, that is awesome. I think that's a great example that you gave. And I have to say, and I have to be honest, Love Bay, I was on the other end of the spectrum. So I had no problem expressing my anger. I had to dial it back. I mean, I could go from 0 to 100, but I think that goes back to your point of dealing with the root of the issue.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there were moments where I would be in situations and I would just want something to happen. I would just want in a particular situation, yes, you say something. You just go ahead and say it. Like, but I had to be honest. It was not even about the current situation I was in. It was me being angry with my ex-husband. It was me being angry with the domestic violence. It was me being angry um, at the fact that I couldn't display my anger towards him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to deal with the root. And so I had to dial it back in a healthy way and deal with issues as they came along separately. I had to separate issues in my everyday life that had nothing to do with my ex-husband, had nothing to do with the domestic violence. But I had to be honest with myself. And I had to do the work. And it was hard. It did not feel good. Um, I was never, mean or disrespectful to anyone, but it's like if you did or said something, you got a response. But I had to realize, those responses were not always healthy. And I've said before, even there are some situations where a response was warranted, but not magnified to the point of where my anger took me because I wasn't healed. And I think nothing is wrong with being angry, but as Jen said, you handle it the right way. You do express it, so you don't hide it. You don't pretend, like you're not angry. You don't pretend like you're not hurt. You don't pretend like you're not upset. Um, but you can't be Incredible Hulk either if a cup is moved out of place. But again, there's I think that's growth, and I think I don't think you can experience true pleasure or happiness if you really don't deal with anger in the right way. So if you don't learn how to express it, not to just be volatile and not to be a little church mouse. You have to speak up, but speak up, in the right ways, in the right terms. But yeah, I don't think pleasure is possible if you don't learn how to handle all of your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's being a mature adult. And then, when you've dealt with trauma, I think that's just the healing process. And everybody's different. It takes time because it took me a minute to identify I'm not angry with this person in front of me. I'm really still angry with my ex-husband. And then I had to learn how to, work through that, how to deal with it. Just to come to terms with that was a lot for me. It really was. To be able to hold my tongue and handle it differently, that took some work for me to do, but I'm in a better place. But again, you can't hide from it. Whatever you feel, whatever you think, it's okay. You just have to handle it in the right way. And I think women get a bad rep. And I want to say, especially African American women,
Yes.
because it's like you're not supposed to be angry about anything, even if there's, not trauma in your life. It's like you're just supposed to be happy go lucky. No, and just being a woman, we're women, that's a job. We're mothers, we're wives, we have to go to work or you're home caring for the family and you find yourself putting yourself on a back burner, not because you want to, but at times that's the easiest answer. If I'm last, I can take care of everybody else. And I think that's just culture today. And when you stand against that, it's like you're not heard if you're speaking politely and respectfully. And then you're not heard if you have to raise your voice. It's something wrong with either one. So look, we get the short end of the stick
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
Truly.
But all of that to say, Love Bay, pleasure is possible. Handle your emotions, handle your emotions the right way. We are just under the hour, but Pam, I do want to ask you one last question that I have. Earlier in the week, we were talking about safety and concern for individuals when they're sharing their stories.
Yes.
I think good words to use for that would be compassion and care. Caring about the individual, caring about people who are affected by domestic violence and who are dealing with it. How important is it for you to be able to share your story or your experience, even to share your project in your own way, in your own timing, and in your own words? How important is that?
I would say that every time I share my story, it lessens the effect it has on me, or the grip it has on me, or the hold it has on me. So when I take that skeleton out of the closet, each time I do, there's more freedom that comes.
Mm.
And that's the beauty. But it's scary to do that. And also, we have to have discernment. We have to intuitively know when we need to know what safety in our body feels like, so we know when we can share our story.
Yes.
Right? So when I talked to you earlier in the week, I could feel safety with you. You were honoring me, and I acknowledged that. And I said, I will feel comfortable sharing my story.
Mm.
So when we get to know what that feels like in our own self, we always have to come back to here. When we know what it feels like inside of us to feel that kind of safety, we will know intuitively intuitively know who we can share with, who we can express our anger with, who we can share our grief with, who those people are that can be empathetic with us and hold us in those times, right? Whether it's anger or grief, or whether we're angry at another or we're angry with ourselves. I've certainly been angry with myself.
Mm.
And sometimes we just do. We need another human. And to know when that human is safe, that comes from here, from us.
Mm.
So when we practice on the regular, finding safety in ourselves, that's a lot of the work that I do, is helping guide finding that place. For each person, it's different and it feels different.
Mm-hmm.
The more we tap into that, the more we're able to discern who we can share with, right? And when we can share.
Yes.
Right. And each time we share, we experience more freedom.
Yeah.
That's the whole circle, right? That you spoke of in the beginning. We're always circling.
Mm.
It's not really a straight line.
Never a straight line.
Pam, thank you so much for being with us. Would you share your contact information for our listeners and viewers who would like to have more information on your program?
Sure. They can find me via email at earthmamap@gmail.com. So if you want to send me a personal email, I thoroughly love to connect with others. Or if you just want to see me, I am on Facebook. My personal page is Pam Villeneuve. You can see myself and who I am, and my family and friends. And also the Heart of Pleasure Project is on Facebook at this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jen, do you have a final word for our viewers and listeners on tonight?
Yeah, I guess I would just say that our emotions are big. And so sometimes I don't think we get a lot of guidance or a lot of help in how to walk through them and process them. And so we like to kind of pretend that they're not there or make excuses for them. And that's a really great way for your emotions to start creeping up and controlling you, instead of you having control over them. And so, like Pam is saying, just the practice of, understanding your own heart and mind and where you're at and what you're feeling and how you feel safe. I think it's so important, and I think it's such a beautiful way to walk through life confidently in who you are and what you present. So yeah, I would just encourage everybody to take that away from here and start practicing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Pam, for being with us. I'm absolutely sure we would love to have you back with us. Love Bay, we thank you for being with us on tonight as well. If you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. Thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we're rising out of the ashes together. Have a good evening.